Kimberly Chen stared at the manila folder on her desk, its contents seemingly as mundane as watching paint dry. Data entry for outdated personnel files, the kind of assignment that screamed, "We don't know what to do with you." But in exactly 3 hours and 17 minutes, this former Army intelligence officer would uncover a security breach that had been bleeding classified information for over 18 months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the sterile government building as Kimberly adjusted her ergonomic chair for the third time that morning. Room 402B of the Department of Homeland Security's regional office in Phoenix felt more like a storage closet than a workspace. No windows, beige walls, and the faint smell of old coffee that seemed permanently embedded in the carpet fibers. Her supervisor, Director Patricia Holloway, had delivered the assignment with barely concealed irritation. "We need someone to digitize these personnel records from the archived system. Should keep you occupied while we figure out your permanent placement." The woman's tone made it clear this wasn't a career-advancing opportunity. Kimberly had arrived at DHS 3 weeks earlier as part of a military-to-civilian transition program. 8 years in Army intelligence, specializing in counterintelligence operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, had prepared her for complex threat assessments and covert surveillance networks. It had not prepared her for the bureaucratic maze of civilian government work, where her security clearance seemed to matter less than her ability to navigate office politics. The personnel files dated back to 2019, a mix of current employees and contractors who had worked on various classified projects. Each folder contained standard information: background check summaries, security clearance levels, project assignments, and performance evaluations. The task was straightforward: scan each document, upload it to the secure database, and update the digital records accordingly. By 10:30 a.m., Kimberly had processed 47 files. The repetitive nature of the work allowed her mind to wander, but old habits from her military training kept part of her attention focused on patterns and anomalies. It was during the processing of the 48th file that something caught her eye. Marcus Webb, a cybersecurity contractor who had worked on 3 different classified communication systems between 2020 and 2022. His background check showed standard credentials: computer science degree from Arizona State, previous experience with defense contractors, appropriate security clearance. Nothing unusual on the surface. But there was something about the timing of his project assignments that triggered Kimberly's analytical instincts. She pulled up the digital records on her secure terminal and cross-referenced Webb's assignment dates with the project timelines. Each project he'd been assigned to had experienced what the reports euphemistically called minor security incidents within 6 months of his involvement. Data corruption in secure communication channels, unexplained network anomalies, and what appeared to be routine system maintenance that coincidentally occurred during periods of sensitive operations. Kimberly reached for her coffee mug, now containing lukewarm liquid that tasted more like disappointment than caffeine. Her military training had taught her that coincidences were rarely coincidental, especially in intelligence work. She made a mental note to dig deeper into Webb's file, but continued with her assigned task. The next dozen files revealed nothing remarkable: contract employees, government analysts, IT support staff, all with clean records and unremarkable career trajectories. But file number 61 stopped her cold. Sarah Voss, a data analyst who had worked alongside Marcus Webb on 2 of the 3 projects that experienced security incidents. Her background was spotless: master's degree in data science from University of Colorado, 5 years of government service, exemplary performance reviews. But her access logs, buried deep in the administrative section of her file, showed something interesting. Voss had accessed secure databases during off hours on 17 different occasions over the past 2 years. Each access was logged as routine maintenance or emergency data recovery, but the timing aligned suspiciously with periods when sensitive intelligence was being processed through the systems she maintained. Kimberly felt the familiar tingle of recognition that had served her well in combat zones.
Patterns were emerging, but she needed more data points to confirm her suspicions. She glanced at the stack of remaining files, still over 100 to process. Director Holloway expected this busy work to occupy her for at least a week, possibly two. Instead of continuing in chronological order, Kimberly began pulling files strategically. She focused on personnel who had worked on the same classified projects as Webb and Voss, looking for additional connections. The Secure Terminal search function allowed her to cross-reference names, project codes, and access logs across multiple databases. By noon, she had identified a third individual, Trevor Morrison, a network security specialist who had briefly consulted on one of the affected projects. His file was thinner than the others. He'd only worked for the department for 8 months before transferring to a private sector position. But his departure date was interesting, exactly 2 weeks after the most serious security incident on record, when classified communication protocols for overseas operations had been compromised. The 3 names now sat in Kimberly's notebook, connected by a web of project assignments, suspicious timing, and convenient explanations for unusual access patterns. Her military instincts were screaming that she'd stumbled onto something significant, but civilian protocol demanded she follow proper channels. She picked up her desk phone to call Director Holloway, then hesitated. The woman had made it clear that Kimberly's role was to process files, not analyze them. Presenting theory
about potential security breaches on her 3rd week of mundane assignments would likely be dismissed as an overactive imagination from someone trying too hard to prove her worth. Instead, Kimberly decided to gather more concrete evidence. She accessed the incident reports for each compromised project, looking for technical details that might support her emerging theory. The reports were heavily redacted, but the timestamps and system logs painted a concerning picture. Each incident had occurred during periods when all 3 individuals, Webb, Voss, and Morrison, had legitimate reasons to access the affected systems. Webb's cybersecurity role gave him administrative privileges. Voss's data analysis position required her to monitor information flow, and Morrison's network security consultations provided him with system architecture access. The beauty of their potential operation, if Kimberly's suspicions were correct, lay in its simplicity. No single person had done anything obviously suspicious. No dramatic security violations or obvious breaches of protocol. Just 3 professionals doing their jobs with slightly unusual timing and remarkably consistent results. Kimberly leaned back in her chair, processing the implications. If she was right, the department had been infiltrated by a sophisticated network that had been operating for nearly 2 years. If she was wrong, she was about to destroy her civilian career before it had properly started by accusing respected colleagues of treason based on circumstantial evidence and pattern recognition. The clock on her computer screen showed 1:47 p.m. In less than 4 hours, she had gone from processing routine paperwork to potentially uncovering the most significant security breach in the department's recent history. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she'd skipped lunch while following the digital breadcrumbs that led to this moment. But there was one more file she needed to examine, one more piece of the puzzle that would either confirm her theory or send her back to the mundane world of data entry and bureaucratic assignments. The file Kimberly needed belonged to Jennifer Liu, a systems administrator who had worked across all 3 compromised projects. Unlike the others, Liu's access patterns appeared completely normal: standard working hours, routine maintenance schedules, predictable database queries. But her personnel record contained something the others lacked: a detailed financial disclosure form required for her elevated security clearance. Kimberly spread the documents across her cramped desk, creating a timeline that would have impressed her former intelligence unit commanders. Liu's financial situation told a story of gradual improvement that didn't match her government salary. Small increases in her savings account, a new car purchase that coincided with the second security incident, and a mortgage approval for a house that should have been beyond her means. The beauty of Liu's role became apparent as Kimberly studied the technical specifications buried in the project files. As systems administrator, Liu had legitimate access to backup protocols, emergency recovery procedures, and system restoration processes.
She could have created shadow copies of sensitive data during routine maintenance windows, making her the perfect inside coordinator for the operation. But Lou's file revealed something else, something that made Kimberly's pulse quicken. 3 months ago, Lou had submitted a resignation letter, citing a desire to pursue private sector opportunities. The resignation had been withdrawn 2 weeks later, with a note from Director Holloway approving Lou's request for additional professional development training. Kimberly pulled up the department's organizational chart on her secure terminal. Lou reported directly to Deputy Director Michael Ashford, who oversaw all information systems security. Ashford's name had appeared multiple times in the incident reports, always as the official who had approved the emergency protocols that Lou subsequently implemented. The pieces were falling into place with uncomfortable clarity. Webb provided technical expertise to identify vulnerabilities. Voss analyzed data flows to determine what information was most valuable. Morrison mapped network architectures to plan extraction routes, and Lou executed the actual data transfers during maintenance windows. But they needed someone with administrative authority to provide cover and ensure investigations didn't dig too deep. Kimberly accessed Ashford's personnel file, expecting to find the smoking gun that would complete her theory. Instead, she found a decorated career spanning 15 years, commendations for exceptional service, and a recent promotion that had made him one of the youngest deputy directors in department history. His financial disclosures were pristine, his security clearance reviews had been exemplary, and his project assignments showed no unusual patterns. For the first time since beginning her investigation, Kimberly felt doubt creeping in. Ashford's record was too clean, his career progression too perfect. Either he was genuinely innocent, or he was far more sophisticated than his co-conspirators. Military intelligence had taught her that the most dangerous operatives were often those who appear beyond suspicion. She decided to approach the problem from a different angle. Instead of looking for direct evidence, she began examining the incident response procedures that Ashford had implemented. Each compromised project had followed the same pattern: initial discovery of anomalies, escalation to Ashford's office, implementation of containment protocols, and subsequent investigation that ultimately concluded the incidents were due to system malfunctions rather than deliberate breaches. The investigation reports made for fascinating reading. External cybersecurity firms had been brought in to conduct forensic analysis, but their access had been carefully controlled. Key personnel had been interviewed, but the questioning had focused on technical failures rather than potential insider threats. Physical security had been reviewed, but digital access logs had been deemed too voluminous for detailed examination. Kimberly realized that Ashford's true genius lay not in covering up the operation, but in directing investigations away from the human element. Each incident had been thoroughly investigated and officially resolved, making it virtually impossible for future reviewers to question the conclusions without appearing incompetent or paranoid.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Her secure phone buzzed with a text message from Director Holloway. "How's the file processing coming along? Need those records updated by the end of the week." The timestamp showed 3:15 p.m. Kimberly had been so absorbed in her investigation that she'd barely touched the original assignment that had led to her discoveries. She quickly processed another dozen personnel files, maintaining the appearance of productive busywork while her mind raced through the implications of what she'd uncovered. The operation was still active. Lou's withdrawn resignation suggested they weren't planning to shut down anytime soon. Morrison's departure had been the only disruption, and even that had been handled smoothly enough to avoid raising suspicions. The question now was what to do with her findings. Military protocol would have been straightforward: document everything, report up the chain of command, and let counterintelligence professionals take over. But the civilian bureaucracy was different, especially when her suspicions implicated a deputy director who outranked everyone in the regional office except Director Holloway herself. Kimberly considered her options while mechanically scanning documents. She could present her findings to Holloway, but that would require explaining why she'd gone far beyond her assigned duties to conduct an unauthorized investigation. She could contact the FBI directly, but they would likely refer the matter back through official channels. She could reach out to her former military contacts, but they had no jurisdiction over civilian government operations. There was also the possibility that she was completely wrong. Pattern recognition had served her well in combat situations where the stakes were immediate and the consequences visible. But civilian intelligence work operated on different timescales and different rules of evidence. What looked like a sophisticated espionage network might simply be a series of unfortunate coincidences involving competent professionals doing their jobs. As she processed the 78th personnel file, Kimberly made a decision that would either vindicate her instincts or end her civilian career before it had properly begun. She began documenting everything, not just her suspicions, but her methodology, her evidence, and her analysis. If she was going to present this to Director Holloway, she needed to do it with the same precision and thoroughness that had made her an effective intelligence officer. The documentation process revealed gaps in her evidence that she hadn't noticed during the initial investigation. Some of the timing coincidences were less precise than she'd initially thought. Several access logs had legitimate explanations that she hadn't fully considered. The financial improvements in Lou's situation could be attributed to factors other than illicit payments. But the overall pattern remained compelling. 4 individuals with complementary skills and coordinated access had been present during every significant security incident. Their collective actions, while individually defensible, had created opportunities for systematic data extraction. And the investigation procedures implemented by Ashford had consistently prevented deeper examination of insider threat possibilities. By 4:30 p.m., Kimberly had assembled a comprehensive briefing document that laid out her findings with military precision. Charts showing personnel connections, timelines correlating access patterns with incident dates, and analysis of investigation procedures that had consistently overlooked human factors. It was either the work of a paranoid newcomer seeing conspiracies where none existed, or evidence of the most sophisticated insider threat operation in department history. She saved the document to an encrypted folder on her secure workstation and leaned back in her ergonomic chair. In exactly 3 hours and 43 minutes, she had gone from processing routine paperwork to potentially uncovering a multi-year espionage operation. Now came the hardest part, deciding whether her evidence was strong enough to risk everything in a confrontation with the very people she suspected of betraying their country. Kimberly's finger hovered over the delete key. One click would erase hours of investigation and return her to the safe world of mundane file processing. Instead, she opened a new browser window and navigated to the department's secure messaging system. Her cursor blinked in the recipient field as she weighed her options one final time. Rather than going directly to Director Holloway, Kimberly decided on a different approach. She composed a message to Agent Victoria Reeves, a counterintelligence specialist she'd worked with during her final year in the Army. Reeves now worked for the Defense Security Service, investigating threats to classified information across government agencies. Vic, stumbled onto something during routine admin work that might interest your people. Can we talk offline? The response came back within minutes. Coffee and 20, Starbucks on Central Avenue. Kimberly locked her workstation and grabbed her jacket, telling the administrative assistant she was taking a late lunch break. The Arizona sun felt good on her face after hours under fluorescent lights, but the warmth did nothing to calm the nervous energy coursing through her system. Victoria Reeves hadn't changed much since their Army days, still tall and lean, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was already seated at a corner table when Kimberly arrived, 2 coffee cups positioned strategically to ensure their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "You look like someone who's seen a ghost," Reeves said without preamble. "What's got you spooked have to reach out through unofficial channels?" Kimberly outlined her discoveries methodically, watching Reeves' expression shift from casual interest to focused attention. When she finished, Reeves sat quietly for several moments, processing the information with the same analytical approach that had made her an effective counterintelligence officer. "You realize what you're suggesting," Reeves finally said.
A coordinated insider threat operation involving senior personnel at a major government facility. That's not just career-ending if you're wrong. It's the kind of mistake that follows you forever.
I know the risks, Kimberly replied, but I also know what I found. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. Reeves pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be an encrypted messaging app. There's something you should know. DSS has been tracking anomalous intelligence losses across 3 different agencies over the past 18 months. Small-scale stuff, nothing that triggered major investigations individually, but the cumulative picture is concerning. Your timeline matches some of our data points. The confirmation sent a chill down Kimberly's spine. Her suspicions weren't just theoretical. They were part of a larger pattern that professional counterintelligence officers had already noticed. "What's your next move?" Reeves asked. "I was planning to brief Director Holloway tomorrow morning. Present everything formally and let her decide how to proceed." Reeves shook her head. "Bad idea. If Ashford is involved, he'll know about any investigation within hours. These people have been operating for nearly 2 years without detection. They're not amateurs. The moment they realize someone's onto them, evidence will disappear and witnesses will develop convenient memory problems. Then what do you suggest? Give me tonight to run this up my chain. DSS can initiate a formal investigation that bypasses your local command structure. It'll take longer, but it won't tip off potential subjects before we're ready to act." Kimberly felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Transferring responsibility to professionals would protect her from accusations of overreach, but it also meant losing control of information she'd worked hard to develop. "There's one more thing," she said. "I think they're planning something bigger. Lou's withdrawn resignation, the timing of recent access patterns, Ashford's increased involvement in project oversight. It feels like they're positioning for a major operation." Reeves made notes on her phone. "Any idea what they might be targeting?" "The department is implementing new communication protocols for overseas assets next month. If someone wanted to compromise our intelligence networks, that would be the perfect opportunity." Back at the office, Kimberly forced herself to return to the mundane task of processing personnel files. But her mind kept racing through possibilities and contingencies. What if Reeves couldn't get authorization for an investigation? What if DSS decided the evidence was too circumstantial? What if the operation concluded before anyone took action? Her secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you had an interesting lunch. Some conversations are better kept private. A friend." The message made Kimberly's blood run cold. Someone had been watching her meeting with Reeves, which meant the network was more sophisticated than she'd realized. They have surveillance capabilities and weren't afraid to let her know it. She looked around the sterile office environment with new eyes. How many knew about her investigation? Has someone been monitoring her computer access? Were there others in the building who were part of the operation? The paranoia that served intelligence officers well in hostile territories began kicking in. Kimberly saved her work and prepared to leave for the day, but not before taking precautions that her military training had made instinctive. She photographed key documents with her personal phone, uploaded them to an encrypted cloud storage account, and sent copies to a secure email address that only she and Reeves knew about. As she walked to her car in the parking garage, Kimberly noticed a black sedan with tinted windows that hadn't been there when she arrived that morning. The vehicle's occupants weren't visible, but she could see the faint glow of electronic devices inside. Professional surveillance, conducted by people who wanted her to know she was being watched. She looked around the sterile office environment with new eyes. How many people knew about her investigation? Has someone been monitoring her computer access? Were there others in the building who were part of the operation? The paranoia that served intelligence officers well in hostile territories began kicking in. Kimberly saved her work and prepared to leave for the day, but not before taking precautions that her military training had made instinctive. She photographed key documents with her personal phone, uploaded them to an encrypted cloud storage account, and sent copies to a secure email address that only she and Reeves knew about. As she walked to her car in the parking garage,
Kimberly noticed a black sedan with tinted windows that hadn't been there when she arrived that morning. The vehicle's occupants weren't visible, but she could see the faint glow of electronic devices inside. Professional surveillance, conducted by people who wanted her to know she was being watched. Instead of driving directly home, Kimberly took a circuitous route through Phoenix's busy afternoon traffic. The sedan followed at a discreet distance, confirming her suspicions but also revealing something important. They weren't trying to eliminate her, just intimidate her. Her apartment felt different when she arrived. Not obviously disturbed, but somehow wrong. Small things were slightly out of place. A magazine turned at a different angle, a kitchen drawer not quite fully closed, a bathroom towel folded differently than she remembered. Professional searchers had been through her living space, looking for evidence of her investigation, but trying to avoid detection. Kimberly's military training kicked in as she conducted a systematic sweep of her apartment. No obvious surveillance devices, no signs of forced entry, nothing missing or obviously compromised. But the message was clear. They knew where she lived, they could access her private space, and they were monitoring her activities closely. Her secure phone rang with a call from Reeves. "We need to meet again, tonight. Same place, but use the back entrance and come alone. There have been developments." The urgency in Reeves' voice suggested that events were moving faster than either of them had anticipated. As Kimberly prepared to leave her apartment, she wondered if her decision to investigate those mundane personnel files had set in motion a chain of events that would either expose a major security threat or destroy everything she'd worked to build in her civilian career. She grabbed her jacket and car keys, knowing that the next few hours would determine whether her 3-hour investigation would be remembered as brilliant detective work or a paranoid fantasy that had spiraled dangerously out of control.
The back entrance of the Starbucks led through a narrow alley that smelled of dumpster refuse and old rain. Kimberly approached cautiously, her military training automatically cataloging potential escape routes and defensive positions. The black sedan had followed her part way across town before disappearing into traffic, but she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were still watching. Victoria Reeves emerged from the shadows near the employee parking area, her face grim in the amber glow of a security light. "We've got a problem," she said without greeting. "DSS ran preliminary checks on your suspects. Webb and Morrison are ghosts." "What do you mean, ghosts?" "Their employment histories before joining the department don't hold up under scrutiny. Webb's supposed previous employer has no record of him. Morrison's university transcripts were fabricated with impressive attention to detail, but the professors he claims to have studied under never existed. These aren't just insider threats, they're foreign operatives with deep cover identities." The revelation hit Kimberly like a physical blow. She'd uncovered what she thought was a corruption scheme, but had actually stumbled onto a sophisticated intelligence operation run by hostile foreign agents. The stakes weren't just department security, they were national security. "There's more," Reeves continued. "Lou's financial improvements weren't just suspicious, they're textbook operational funding. Small, regular payments designed to look like legitimate income, but sourced through a network of shell companies that trace back to accounts in countries that don't cooperate with our financial investigations." They walked deeper into the alley, away from potential surveillance devices. The urban darkness provided concealment, but also made Kimberly acutely aware of their vulnerability. Professional intelligence operatives who had maintained deep cover for years wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats to their mission. "What about Ashford?" Kimberly asked. "That's where things get complicated. Ashford appears to be exactly what his record suggests, a dedicated government employee with an exemplary career, but his investigation procedures have been so consistently ineffective that he's either incompetent or complicit. DSS analysts think he might be an unwitting asset, manipulated rather than recruited." Reeves handed Kimberly a secure phone with encryption capabilities. "My supervisors want to meet with you tomorrow, but tonight we need to document everything you've discovered before it disappears." The operatives know they're compromised. That threatening message proves it.
They'll be implementing damage control protocols immediately. What kind of damage control? Evidence destruction, asset extraction, possibly eliminating anyone who poses a threat to the operation. You've been marked as a priority target because you connected dots that professional investigators missed. They can't let you present your findings to anyone with authority to act on them. The weight of the situation settled on Kimberly's shoulders like a heavy pack during a forced march. Her curiosity about mundane personnel files had evolved into a life-threatening confrontation with professional spies. The skills that had kept her alive in combat zones were now essential for surviving Phoenix office politics taken to lethal extremes. "There's something else," Reeves said. "We think they're accelerating their timeline. Communications intercepts suggest a major operation is planned for this weekend, coinciding with the new protocol implementation you mentioned. If they can compromise the system during the transition period, they'll have access to intelligence networks across multiple agencies." Kimberly processed this information while scanning the alley for potential threats. The operation wasn't winding down. It was building toward a climax that could devastate American intelligence capabilities for years. Her investigation had inadvertently triggered the final phase of a mission that foreign adversaries had been planning and executing for nearly 2 years. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Access to the original files and any documentation you've created. But more importantly, we need you to maintain normal behavior patterns tomorrow while DSS positions assets for surveillance and interdiction. If the operatives suspect that federal investigators are involved, they'll abort the mission and disappear before we can capture them or assess the full scope of the damage." The secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Package ready for pickup at usual location. The timeline moved to Friday evening per recent developments. Confirm receipt." Reeves examined the message with professional interest. This wasn't meant for you. Someone's communication protocols got crossed, probably due to operational stress. They're definitely accelerating their schedule. Friday evening is tomorrow, Kimberly realized. If they're extracting assets and implementing their final operations simultaneously, we have less than 24 hours to stop them. DSS is mobilizing resources, but the federal bureaucracy moves slowly even in crisis situations. We need local intelligence to track their movements and identify their operational base. That means you go back to work tomorrow and continue your file processing while feeding us real-time information. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. Kimberly would serve as an unwitting intelligence asset herself, maintaining her cover as a routine employee while actually conducting surveillance on foreign operatives who had already demonstrated their willingness to use intimidation tactics.
"There's one more thing you should know," Reeves said. "The apartment search you detected wasn't random. They were looking for specific items, evidence of your investigation, but also personal information they could use for leverage. Family members, financial vulnerabilities, anything that could be used to ensure your cooperation or silence." Kimberly thought about her parents in Seattle, her sister in Denver, friends from her military service scattered across the country. Professional intelligence operatives with deep cover identities and operational funding could reach anyone, anywhere. The threat wasn't just to her career or her life. It was to everyone she cared about. How do I protect them? DSS is implementing protective protocols, but the best defense is stopping this operation before they have time to implement contingency plans. The message intercept suggests they're focused on completing their primary mission rather than managing loose ends. But that could change quickly if they perceive an immediate threat. They began walking back toward the main street, staying in shadows and maintaining situational awareness that had become second nature during their military careers. The city lights of Phoenix stretched out before them, hiding a network of foreign operatives who had successfully penetrated multiple levels of government security. "Tomorrow morning, go to work early," Reeves instructed. "Act nervous but not panicked. They expect you to be rattled after yesterday's warning. Continue processing files, but pay attention to any unusual activity from Lou, Ashford, or anyone else who might be connected to the operation. DSS surveillance teams will be in position, but you're our primary intelligence source inside the building. As they reached the parking area, Kimberly felt the familiar combination of fear and determination that had sustained her through dangerous missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. The environment was different, but the stakes were just as high, and the consequences of failure just as severe. What happens if they realize I'm working with federal investigators? Reeves' expression was grim in the streetlight. Then you follow the emergency extraction protocols I'm about to teach you, and we hope DSS response teams can reach you before the operatives decide you're too dangerous to leave alive. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Arizona dawn that usually energized Kimberly. But today the sunshine felt ominous. She arrived at the department building 30 minutes early, as Reeves had instructed, and noticed immediately that the atmosphere had changed. Security guards were more attentive, ID checks were more thorough, and there seemed to be more personnel moving through the corridors than usual. Jennifer Liu was already at her workstation when Kimberly passed the IT department, unusual for someone who typically arrived precisely at 8:30. Liu's body language was tense, her movements efficient but hurried as she worked on what appeared to be system maintenance protocols. Their eyes met briefly through the glass partition, and Liu's expression held something that looked like sympathy mixed with warning. Room 402B felt different too. Someone had been inside since yesterday evening. Not the obvious intrusion she'd detected at her apartment, but subtle signs that trained eyes could recognize. Her chair was adjusted differently, papers were stacked in slightly altered order, and her computer monitor had been moved a fraction of an inch. Professional searchers conducting a final intelligence assessment. Kimberly settled into her routine of processing personnel files, but her attention was focused on the secure phone Reeves had given her. Text messages would provide real-time updates from DSS surveillance teams positioned throughout the building. The first message arrived at 9:15. Subject M in parking garage level B2. 2 unknown associates. Preparing for departure. Marcus Webb was leaving the building with people who weren't department employees. The operation was definitely in its final phase, which meant the major intelligence compromise would happen soon. Kimberly continued scanning documents while monitoring her surroundings for any indication that she was being watched. At 10:30 a.m., Deputy Director Ashford appeared in her doorway, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. "Miss Chen, I need to speak with you immediately, in my office." The walk down the corridor felt like a death march. Ashford's office was located in the secure section of the building, requiring additional clearance and providing isolation from potential witnesses. As they passed through the security checkpoint, Kimberly noticed Liu watching from her workstation with an expression that confirmed her worst suspicions. Ashford's office was spartanly decorated, dominated by awards and commendations, that spoke to a distinguished career in government service. But today, the man behind the desk looked like someone whose world was collapsing. His hands trembled slightly as he gestured for Kimberly to sit. "I know what you've been doing," he said without preamble. "The file processing was just cover for something else entirely. You've been investigating my staff, haven't you?" Kimberly maintained her composure, drawing on years of military training in resisting interrogation. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. I've been processing personnel files as assigned." "Don't lie to me." Ashford's voice carried a desperation that suggested he was operating under extreme pressure. "Sarah Voss came to me yesterday, said you'd been asking questions about project timelines and access logs, questions that had nothing to do with routine file processing." The mention of Voss sent alarm bells through Kimberly's mind. She hadn't contacted Voss directly, which meant the data analyst had been monitoring Kimberly's computer activity and reporting back to someone. The network was more extensive than even DSS had realized.
"Sir, if I've somehow exceeded my assigned duties, I apologize. I was just trying to be thorough." Ashford stood and walked to his window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline with the expression of someone contemplating an impossible decision. "Miss Chen, I'm going to tell you something that could destroy my career, but I think you're in danger, and I may be the only person who can help you." He turned back to face her, and Kimberly saw genuine fear in his eyes.
3 months ago, I started noticing irregularities in our security incident reports, small things that didn't quite add up. When I tried to investigate further, I was approached by people who made it clear that asking questions would have serious consequences for my family. The revelation reframed everything Kimberly thought she understood about the operation. Ashford wasn't a willing collaborator. He was another victim, coerced into compliance through threats to his loved ones. They showed me photographs of my daughter at her college in California, Ashford continued. Detailed knowledge of my wife's daily routine, my son's deployment schedule with the Navy, made it clear that cooperation was the only way to ensure their safety. "Who approached you?" Kimberly asked. "That's the terrifying part. I don't know. Professional intelligence operatives who knew everything about department procedures and personnel. They didn't need to recruit insiders because they already had people in place. They just needed someone with administrative authority to provide cover and misdirect investigations." Ashford returned to his desk and pulled out a secure tablet. "But I've been documenting everything, building a case that I hoped to eventually present to federal authorities. Your investigation accelerated my timeline because they're planning something major today, and they view you as a threat that needs to be eliminated." The tablet screen showed detailed logs of coercive contacts, photographs of surveillance, and documentation of how investigation procedures had been manipulated. Ashford had been building his own counterintelligence case while appearing to cooperate with foreign operatives. "What's happening today?" Kimberly asked. "New communication protocols go live at 6 p.m. During the transition window, Lou will have legitimate access to every secure database in the system. The operatives plan to extract intelligence on overseas assets, communication networks, and operational procedures. The data will be transmitted to foreign handlers before anyone realizes what's happened." Kimberly's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message from Reeves. "Building lockdown initiated. Federal agents en route. Maintain position and avoid contact with subjects." "We need to get you out of here," Ashford said, apparently receiving a similar message on his own device. "The operation is starting early. They've moved up the timeline because they know federal investigators are involved." Through the office window, Kimberly could see unusual activity in the parking garage. Black vehicles were positioned around the building exits, and personnel in tactical gear were taking strategic positions. DSS had implemented their interdiction plan, but the foreign operatives had anticipated this development. "There's something else," Ashford said. "Lou isn't just extracting data. She's planting malware that will provide ongoing access to our systems. Even if we stop today's operation, they'll have backdoor access for months or years." The scope of the threat was staggering. A successful operation wouldn't just compromise current intelligence, it would provide foreign adversaries with persistent access to American security networks. The 3 hours Kimberly had spent processing personnel files had led to the discovery of an intelligence disaster that could affect national security for decades. "How do we stop it?" she asked. Ashford's expression was grim as he accessed his administrative controls. "I have emergency authority to shut down all network access, but if I use it now, before we have evidence of the actual data extraction, the operatives will claim it was routine maintenance and escape prosecution. We need to catch them in the act." The secure phone buzzed again. Subjects barricaded in server room, technical team bypassing security protocols. Estimated 15 minutes until data extraction begins. Kimberly realized that her investigation had set in motion a chain of events that would climax in the next quarter hour. Foreign operatives with years of preparation were implementing their final mission, while federal agents attempted to stop them. And she was sitting in the office of the one person who could prevent a catastrophic intelligence breach, if they could time their intervention perfectly. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Ashford pulled up network monitoring displays that showed system activity across the entire department. Lou's administrative credentials were being used to penetrate systems that contained the most sensitive intelligence assets in the American overseas network.
Each successful breach represented years of careful relationship building and billions of dollars in intelligence operations that would be compromised within minutes.
There, Kimberly pointed to a data stream showing massive file transfers from the personnel database. They're not just accessing information, they're downloading everything. Ashford's fingers flew across his keyboard, implementing emergency protocols that would normally require multiple authorization levels. I'm initiating partial network isolation, but if I shut down too early, their lawyers will claim it was routine maintenance. We need them to complete enough of the transfer to prove criminal intent. Through the office's reinforced windows, they could see federal agents taking positions in the courtyard. DSS had surrounded the building, but the operatives had barricaded themselves in the server room with enough technical expertise to complete their mission before law enforcement could breach their defenses. Kimberly's secure phone rang with a call from Reeves. "We've identified the extraction point," the counterintelligence specialist said without preamble. "They're transmitting data to a mobile relay station 3 blocks away. Once the transfer completes, the intelligence will be uploaded to satellite networks beyond our ability to intercept." "How long do we have?" Kimberly asked. "Based on network traffic analysis, maybe 8 minutes before the critical data leaves our jurisdiction permanently. Can Ashford shut them down?" Kimberly looked at the deputy director, who was monitoring multiple data streams while coordinating with building security. "He's waiting for them to cross the line into obvious criminal activity. If we act too soon, they escape prosecution. If we act too late, they escape with intelligence that could get American agents killed," Reeves replied. "Tell him that good enough is better than perfect when lives are at stake." The tension in Ashford's office was becoming unbearable. Every second of delay allowed more classified information to foreign intelligence services, but premature action could result in the operatives claiming their activities were legitimate system maintenance. The legal threshold for proving espionage required evidence of actual data extraction, not just unauthorized access. Suddenly, the monitoring displays showed a new development. Lou's access credentials were being used to plant files in the system rather than just extracting them. The malware installation that would provide long-term access to American intelligence networks had begun. "Now," Kimberly said, "that's definitely not routine maintenance." Ashford initiated emergency shutdown protocols that immediately severed network connections throughout the building. Security systems activated lockdown procedures that sealed exit routes and disabled elevator access. The federal agents positioned outside received authorization to breach the server room where the operatives had made their final stand. But the network displays showed that significant data transfers had already been completed. Intelligence on overseas assets, communication protocols, and operational procedures had been successfully transmitted to the mobile relay station. The operation had been partially successful despite law enforcement intervention. "How much did they get?" Kimberly asked. Ashford's analysis was sobering. Approximately 60% of the targeted intelligence, enough to compromise multiple networks and endanger agents in the field. "We stopped the malware installation and prevented long-term access, but the immediate damage is substantial." The sounds of breaching charges echoed through the building as federal agents forced entry into the server room. Kimberly's phone buzzed with updates from Reeves. "Lou in custody. 2 unknown subjects neutralized while resisting arrest. Webb escaped through maintenance tunnels." The partial success felt hollow. They had prevented a complete intelligence disaster, but foreign adversaries had still obtained information that could cost American lives and compromise years of careful intelligence work. The operation Kimberly had discovered through routine file processing had achieved many of its objectives despite professional counterintelligence intervention. "There's something else," Ashford said, continuing his analysis of the network logs. The malware they were installing wasn't just for data extraction. It was designed to corrupt our databases, making it impossible to determine what information had been compromised. They weren't just stealing intelligence, they were trying to destroy our ability to assess the damage. The sophistication of the operation was staggering. Foreign intelligence services had spent years developing deep cover operatives, infiltrating multiple levels of government security, and planning an attack that would maximize damage while minimizing detection.
Kimberly's curiosity about mundane personnel files had accidentally disrupted a mission that represented one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in modern history. Federal agents began escorting detained personnel through the corridors. Jennifer Liu walked past Ashford's office in handcuffs, her expression resigned but not defeated. Sarah Voss followed a few minutes later, her data analyst role apparently extending to active participation in the espionage network. Both women had successfully maintained their cover for years while systematically betraying their country. Reeves appeared in the doorway, her tactical vest and communication equipment indicating she had been coordinating the federal response from the field. "We need to debrief both of you immediately. The operatives had contingency plans we're still discovering, and there may be additional cells we haven't identified." The debriefing process took hours. Kimberly recounted her investigation in exhaustive detail, explaining how pattern recognition and military training had led to discoveries that professional security reviews had missed. Ashford provided documentation of his cooperation and the intelligence he had gathered while appearing to assist the foreign operatives. As the day wore on, the scope of the damage became clearer. The extracted intelligence included operational details for networks in Southeast Asia, communication protocols for Middle Eastern assets, and financial information for intelligence operations across 3 continents. American agents would need to be extracted, safe houses would need to be abandoned, and years of careful relationship building would need to be rebuilt. But the prevented damage was even more significant. The malware that would have provided ongoing access to American intelligence systems had been stopped minutes before full deployment. Long-term backdoor access that could have compromised national security for decades had been prevented by Kimberly's investigation and Ashford's willingness to risk his career for the right cause. "What happens now?" Kimberly asked as the debriefing concluded. "Liu and Voss will be prosecuted for espionage, though their lawyers will argue they were coerced," Reeves explained. "Webb's escape complicates things. He's probably already left the country with intelligence that will take years to neutralize. Morrison disappeared months ago and is presumably back with his handlers." "And me?" Reeves smiled for the first time all day. "You're being offered a position with DSS counterintelligence. Your ability to spot patterns that trained investigators missed suggests you have natural aptitude for this kind of work. Interested in making it official?" Kimberly looked around the conference room where she had spent the day explaining how 3 hours of curiosity about personnel files had led to uncovering one of the most sophisticated espionage operations in government history. The transition from military intelligence to civilian security work had been more dramatic than she had ever imagined possible. "I think I'd like that," she said. "But next time, I'm requesting more interesting assignments than data entry." The laughter that followed was tinged with exhaustion and relief. A major intelligence disaster had been partially prevented, foreign operatives had been captured or scattered, and a new counterintelligence officer had been discovered in the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes the most important discoveries came from the most mundane assignments, and sometimes curiosity about boring paperwork could save national security. 3 hours and 17 minutes of pattern recognition had changed everything. 6 months after the Phoenix operation, Kimberly Chen stood in a secure briefing room at DSS headquarters in Washington, D.C., analyzing intelligence reports that would have seemed like science fiction during her days processing personnel files. The wall-mounted displays showed a global network of interconnected espionage cells that made the Arizona infiltration look like a training exercise. Her new position as senior counterintelligence analyst had provided access to classified information that revealed the true scope of foreign intelligence operations targeting American government agencies. The Phoenix cell had been just one node in a vast network spanning dozens of facilities across multiple states, all coordinated by professional intelligence services with resources that dwarfed anything she'd encountered during her military career. "The Morrison lead paid off," Agent Victoria Reeves announced as she entered the briefing room. German intelligence tracked him to a safe house in Berlin where they discovered communication equipment linked to cells in Virginia, Colorado, and California. The Phoenix operation wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a coordinated campaign targeting our entire intelligence infrastructure. Kimberly studied the network analysis charts that connected seemingly unrelated security incidents across a 3-year period. Each incident had been investigated individually and attributed to technical failures, human error, or routine security lapses. But when viewed collectively, they revealed a systematic effort to map American intelligence capabilities and extract operational details that could compromise agents worldwide. "What's the current threat assessment?" she asked. "Mixed news," Reeves replied. "We've identified and neutralized 17 cells, arrested 43 operatives, and disrupted communication networks that had been operating for years. But the intelligence they extracted before we caught them has already caused significant damage. 12 overseas assets have been compromised, requiring emergency extractions. 3 safe houses had to be abandoned, and we're still discovering the full extent of communication protocols that need to be redesigned." The human cost of the operation was sobering. American intelligence officers who had spent years building relationships and gathering critical information had been forced to abandon their missions and start over in new locations with new identities. Sources who had risked their lives providing information about terrorist networks and hostile governments had been exposed, requiring costly and dangerous extraction operations. But the prevented damage was even more significant. The malware that Liu had attempted to install would have provided ongoing access to intelligence databases for years, potentially compromising every American operation worldwide. The network analysis capabilities that Kimberly had developed during her investigation had been refined and deployed to identify similar threats before they could achieve their objectives. "There's something else," Reeves continued. "Deputy Director Ashford is being considered for promotion to lead the new Integrated Security Assessment Division. His experience with coercive recruitment and his documentation of foreign intelligence methods have provided valuable insights for protecting other potential targets." Kimberly felt genuine satisfaction at this news. Ashford's courage in documenting his coerced cooperation while appearing to assist foreign operatives had provided crucial intelligence about how sophisticated adversaries recruit and manage unwitting assets. His willingness to risk everything for the right cause had ultimately advanced American counterintelligence capabilities.
"What about the Phoenix facility itself?" she asked. "Completely restructured. New personnel screening procedures, enhanced monitoring systems, and revised investigation protocols that prioritize human factors over technical explanations. Your pattern recognition methodology has been incorporated into standard security review procedures across all government agencies." The transformation felt surreal. 3 hours of curiosity about routine paperwork had led to fundamental changes in how the American government protected its most sensitive information. The mundane file processing assignment that had seemed like busy work had actually provided the perfect cover for discovering vulnerabilities that professional security reviews had consistently missed. Kimberly's secure workstation chimed with an incoming priority message from the Director of National Intelligence. She opened the encrypted communication and felt her pulse quicken as she read the contents. "New assignment," she announced to Reeves. "Anomalous personnel patterns at a Department of Energy facility in Nevada. 3 contractors with overlapping project assignments and unusual access patterns during off-hours maintenance windows." The similarities to her Phoenix investigation were unmistakable. Foreign intelligence services had apparently refined their infiltration methods based on lessons learned from the Arizona operation, but they were still following recognizable patterns that trained analysts could identify. "How long do you think it will take to develop a complete picture?" Reeves asked. Kimberly smiled as she began accessing the relevant databases and personnel files. "Give me 3 hours." The confidence in her voice reflected hard-earned expertise in recognizing the subtle indicators that distinguished legitimate government employees from sophisticated foreign operatives. Pattern recognition skills that had been honed during military intelligence operations and refined through civilian counterintelligence work now provided the American government with early warning capabilities that could prevent future infiltrations. As she began her analysis, Kimberly reflected on the unexpected path that had led from routine file processing to protecting national security at the highest levels. The Phoenix investigation had taught her that the most important discoveries often came from paying attention to details that others overlooked, that curiosity about mundane assignments could lead to extraordinary revelations, and that 3 hours of careful observation could change the course of intelligence operations worldwide.
The Nevada files awaiting her analysis contained the same type of personnel records that had started everything 6 months earlier. Background checks, security clearances, project assignments, and performance evaluations for contractors working on classified energy research. To most observers, they would appear as routine administrative documents, requiring nothing more than data entry and digital storage. But Kimberly Chen now knew that sometimes the most boring paperwork contained the most dangerous secrets, and that the most effective intelligence officers were those who never stopped asking questions about patterns that seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Her investigation of the Nevada facility would benefit from everything she had learned during the Phoenix operation: advanced analytical tools, enhanced database access, and coordination with counterintelligence specialists across multiple agencies. But the fundamental approach remained the same: careful attention to details, systematic pattern recognition, and the willingness to pursue suspicious anomalies regardless of where they might lead. 3 hours had been enough to uncover a sophisticated espionage network in Phoenix. With improved tools and experience, she was confident that 3 hours would be enough to assess the Nevada situation and determine whether American energy security was facing a similar threat. As Kimberly began processing the first personnel file from the Nevada facility, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. What had started as busy work designed to keep a former military intelligence officer occupied while bureaucrats decided her fate had evolved into a career protecting American national security from some of the most sophisticated threats in the modern world. Sometimes the most important missions began with the most mundane assignments, and sometimes 3 hours of curiosity could save the country. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.